now let's see if that works. Sending data, okay. How did I make it go? I reconnected and I don't see anything happening on YouTube. Okay. Sorry about this. Oh, it is going. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I see it now. Okay. Yeah, okay, continue. I'm gonna have to do cutting and pasting.
Yeah, okay.
And give me just a sec. I'm going to find the old one, right? And tell people where to go. Okay, so here. That's right. Okay, so it's live, right? Yes, it's live. Okay, people are finding it again. Okay, wow. This, I've got to figure out how to solve this. Where were we? So
we had, I think the stream cut off at about the point we had discussed the competitive advantages for shipping inputs to the steel industry via water rather than via rail or via cart or later via truck. At a broad level, uh, it costs an order of magnitude less to ship these heavy bulk commodities via water than it does to ship them via rail. And there's almost nowhere else in the world where uh, all the components for steel manufacturing come together with elegant water shipping routes between them in the same way. And so you see here iron from Wisconsin, northern Michigan, uh, I guess that's Minnesota, and meeting coal coming up from Pennsylvania, coal using the same routes to go back and feed the interior rail. And that's the picture you're looking at.
right. Yeah, okay. So I guess I hadn't understood uh, the basic point you made before, which is about weight. The iron ore and coal are heavy.
Yes.
That's the key point.
Yes, and heavy things are expensive to transport. I mean, you could do this all by truck theoretically, but if you tried to do it by truck, you'd go bankrupt overnight.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Because, I mean, it just if you ever look at mining equipment and look at the fuel usage associated with it, it's unbelievably expensive. Um, and so the reason that circa the 19th century, like more than 50% of the world's steel was produced via this system, um, is because of that cost advantage.
Right. Literally the water um, holding up the heavy stuff, I guess, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Is the water doing that work instead of coal powered train or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the huge cost savings of this system. And oh, and I think you have kind of already been sort of hinting at where we are now, but uh, this is still, despite all the many advantages and so forth, or advances we've had, transport by water is still a significant part of our world, right? I mean,
Well,
these cost advantages of moving heavy things over water, they haven't gone away because we've come up with, I don't know, cars and stuff, right?
yeah, the majority of inputs to the steel industry are still transported this way,
Yeah,
and the cost advantage of moving them this way over rail is still profound.
right. Yeah, so nothing has like
Nothing about the
replaced
system
this.
has
Yeah.
changed, particularly in 170 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because we're just so used to, so many things have changed since the old days. But you're actually saying here's sort of a stable point. You want to ship your coal and your iron ore over water.
Yeah, and we'll actually get to a third element of the system as we review the geology of the region, because modern steel isn't just made from iron and coal; it has additives for a whole variety of reasons. And
Yeah.
it turns out that the mineral additives, nickel being the most common one, are also readily accessible on the Great Lakes waterways.
Hmm.
Um, and so uh, the other bulk ingredients that you need potentially are also here. And also, if you decide that you want to use electric arc furnaces or natural gas furnaces, those ingredients are there as well, right? Pennsylvania is full of natural gas.
Right. Gotcha.
So if we flip forward here,
All right.
so why is all this iron coming from the head of Lake Superior? Well, we have a whole collection of some of the richest iron deposits in the world, and they happen to be, within spitting distance of the western end of Lake Superior. Some in Michigan,
Hmm.
some in Wisconsin, some in Canada, and some in Minnesota. And
Ontario,
so,
Ontario specifically. Yeah.
yes, and so each of these deposits at various points in history have been extensively mined, uh, but there's no shortage of iron in the region, and so uh, if you were to take this map at any given point, you can see it's got marked active mines, but at any given point in history, you'd find different profiles for which mines were active and which mines were
Mm.
inactive.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it says inactive right now, but historically, the reason they're on this map is they were active at some point
Yeah,
since
exactly,
the early 19th century. Yeah.
and if the price of iron changes, then you're going to get some of these become active, some of these become inactive, and so
Right.
on.
Right. Right. Come back online. Yeah.
So
Right. So that's the
that's element
iron.
number one.
Right.
Element number two is coal. Now, some people will be familiar with the fact that there are different grades of coal useful for
Hmm.
different kinds of manufacturing. When you're trying to run steel manufacturing, being able to burn at a very high temperature is a significant advantage. So having these low impurity uh, bituminous coal uh, is a big advantage for steel manufacturing. And you see a deposit of one of the world's largest deposits of this kind of coal in Pennsylvania within short shipping distance of the south coast of, I guess that's Lake Michigan there, or sorry, that's Lake Erie there, I think.
Okay.
Yes. And so when we looked at our previous map, uh, this coal is coming up towards Pittsburgh is right there at the north end of Pennsylvania. That's where the coal for the U.S. steel industry traditionally came from, and to a significant extent still comes from today.
Now these are not right. These seem farther from the lakes, I have to say, than
Yeah, so
the iron is.
this is less convenient, but the river system goes in the right direction.
Gotcha.
Right. So
Okay.
you're looking at the western side of the Appalachian Mountains. All the drainage goes down into the Great Lakes Basin. And
Hmm.
so, depending on exactly which mine you're looking for, either your rail line is going to follow the river line or the river's navigable and you're going to have a coal boat.
Put it on the water. Yeah. Got it. Okay. Water all the way, almost for a lot of it. rail or
Yeah.
water, but a lot of water. Okay.
Okay, and then if we flip one further, as the steel industry evolves, the steel industry starts looking for additives to make stainless steel, um, to make related alloys, particularly for the defense industry. Um, and it turns out that the Canadian Shield on the north side of Lake Superior is incredibly rich in otherwise relatively rare minerals,
Hmm.
uh, from aluminum to tungsten uh, to zinc. Um, these are all either independently part of the defense industry um, part of the uh, part of the additive process for steel. And so, on the same transport network, using the same set of ports, you can get all the additives that you want for your steel industry um, quite readily. And you can
Nice.
see there's a huge diversity of little spots along here, um, but just an unfathomable number of mines for these various additives.
Mm-hmm.
So it, not only was this a natural uh, transport advantage in the 19th century when simple steels were being manufactured, but as the industry evolved in the late 19th and early 20th century, all of the other elements were also right here, also right on the transport network, also very cheap to move. Um, and so this is how you get to the position where in 1940, all of the inputs to the defense industry are right there. And so uh, in this relatively small region of the United States, relatively low population compared to many of the other places
Yeah.
involved in the Second World War, you have this hugely disproportionate amount of manufacturing going on.
I don't know where to slip it in, but something else I learned about Chicago from our friend while I was there is that it was smaller than my own city of St. Louis prior to the war between the states. It had about
Yes.
30,000 people. After about 10 years later, 1871, it had 500,000 people. So what happened is Chicago was chosen for reasons that should be extremely obvious at this point as
Yeah.
an organizing center for the Union war effort. This resulted in a lot of people being moved to Chicago to, I assume, in part to work at the docks and the uh, sorry, my mind's going blank. There were other key things that were happening there. I mean, shipping obviously is key to our conversation, but there were other things happening in Chicago as well.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
right around this time when the U.S. defense military industrial complex kind of gets going, you see Chicago, you see the towns in Michigan, you see the towns in northern Pennsylvania, places like Pittsburgh, all take off because
Yep.
they have this natural advantage.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and so the last bit of the story that just sort of interesting that I'd never pieced together before is that 1871, of course, was the year of the Great Chicago Fire. This is
yeah,
why Chicago is sometimes referred to as Second City because they're referring to the second Chicago because the first one burned down. Um, but one of the points that my friend made that was really interesting is he said what burned down, of course, was essentially a big shanty town, shanty city,
yeah,
because so many people came there so fast. In 10 years, the population was more than 10x, and so all that burned down. But he says amazingly, the fire didn't seem to really affect the key industrial aspects of Chicago. The train, the railroads, the docks, the stockyards, so on and so forth.
Well, and
So
this is one of the things that you see.
economically, Chicago kind of kept rolling, and people just had to rebuild their house. They didn't have any place to live,
Yeah,
but the industry kept rolling, and then it became a showpiece internationally to show off your architecture by helping build cool new buildings in Chicago. And I didn't know this, Chicago was the first modern city, the first city that started to look like what we think of when we think of like Manhattan or something like that. Manhattan actually did it later. Chicago did it first, courtesy of being burned down.
Well, yeah, and you often see this in kind of 19th century fires where the slums burn down, but the main city doesn't, because the
Mm-hmm.
slums are all, well, at least in North America, wood is dirt cheap, so the slums are all made of timber.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, whereas anywhere where you're doing heavy manufacturing, blast furnaces are a thing, so you don't make it out of timber if you can
Mm-hmm.
avoid it.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but I mean, the Chicago World's Fair also plays into it. It's a huge deal around that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, uh, one of the two or three really famous World's Fairs that have ever occurred occurs around the turn of the century in Chicago, which is kind of interesting.
Okay. Um, are you ready for steel plants?
Yeah.
All right.
So, uh, hopefully by this point, it should be fairly clear why this is. But this is a map of current U.S. steel production. Um, critically, the smaller circles, the size of the circle represents the size of the operation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the operations in sort of greeny blue, those are electric arc furnaces. Electric arc furnaces are used primarily for steel recycling rather than steel manufacturing from scratch.
Mm.
Steel recycling has become the dominant mode of the steel industry in the last 30 or 40 years.
Oh,
Um, so most steel is recycled steel right now.
I didn't know that.
Um,
Wow.
but in the period between 1830 and 1950, the inverse was true. There was very little steel recycling. It was dominated by new steel.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
a lot of this has
that's the red, maybe?
that's the red circles.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah. Which is still mostly in that area that we're focusing on here.
yes. So you can see the overwhelming majority of production and the even more overwhelming majority of new steel production is right on this set of waterways,
Right.
for reasons that you know should be relatively obvious at this point.
Um, oh, yeah. So where's the steel coming from that they're recycling?
Mostly, so steel recycling has a diversity of sources, but it's mostly like recycled cars, recycled rail equipment,
Mm.
recycled
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing equipment. Um, almost any large piece of metal gets recycled at the moment,
So
right?
like the junkyards, they
Yeah,
they people strip the parts or whatever, and then eventually it gets sent off for recycling.
that's correct.
Oh, I wondered how that worked. Okay.
So the copper is more valuable for recycling. So there's a process that happens in the junkyards where there's a separation of the metals, and then steel is usually last on the totem pole because it's the cheapest,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes to these arc furnaces that participate in the recycling process.
Right. Okay. So this is 2020 the current year picture here, but the point
Yes,
is if you go back before 1950 or something like that, when steel recycling is not a part of the picture,
you might as
it's
well.
almost completely this Great Lakes area, right?
Yeah. So if you strip off all the blue and all the purple dots, then you see where everything that existed prior to 1970 was.
Right. Oh, and I can't help but point out that one of those big red dots that's not in on the Great Lakes is St. Louis,
On the
which of course
Yeah,
is
on the
on the
Mississippi
Mississippi
River.
River. Yeah, where south of where the Illinois, the confluence of the Illinois and the Mississippi. So yeah.
So even today, even 2024, almost all American steel production is done in this region, using the same fundamental system that has existed for getting close to 200 years.
Amazing.
So if we flip to our next slide here, what is this all worth? Um, so one of the thing, so couple of things to note here. This is in terms of absolute production.
Mm-hmm.
Um, U.S. steel production has not declined nearly as much as most people kind of intuitively feel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we mentioned off the top, there's a narrative out there that the U.S. doesn't produce anything anymore.
Right.
Um, U.S. steel production has been eclipsed by Chinese steel production, and there's a variety of reasons for that. Uh, but it is still plenty large in scale,
Mm-hmm.
um, and still has the same sort of fundamental structural advantages that it had uh, a very long time ago. And so you can see there's a big dip that occurs after NAFTA because steel can then be processed on the north side of the lakes as well as on the south side of the lakes. So a big
Oh.
part of that 1980 story is the emergence of Hamilton as a Canadian steel manufacturing hub.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can kind of see that it sort of ticks along at a relatively stable level. There's a lot of financial problems in the industry at that point, especially as steel recycling gets more and more efficient. Um, but the the U.S. still produces more steel today than it did at the end of the Second World War.
Yeah, I was going to
Um,
say I was comparing across to the 40s, and it's at comparable levels to World War II era steel production, right? So
yes,
that ain't nothing, right?
yeah, and this is in a demobilized economy where
Right.
um, U.S. steel has to compete directly with manufactured goods from all around the world.
Right.
So that's kind of the basic story of the Golden Horseshoe. It's called the Golden Horseshoe because of the shape of Lake Michigan, Lake Erie
Mm-hmm.
together. But probably it should be clear that a big part of the reason why the region works the way it does is all the is the geology of the Lake Superior region and the geology of the Appalachian region
Mm-hmm.
uh, kind of come together to make this unique. Um, there's a few regions like this in the world. There's a region like this uh, in Central Europe, which was the focal point of the first and Second World War along the Ruhr River,
Mm-hmm.
where this is possible. There are a few sort of similar regions elsewhere in the world, but nowhere nearly as efficient and nearly as well organized and nearly as subject to lack of international dispute as the Great Lakes region.
Gotcha. Yeah. Sorry. Just going back to the picture that we actually have up right now.
Yeah,
Um, it seems like from the point of view of the story we're focusing on, which is a cross-border region that includes Canada,
yeah,
um, this picture doesn't quite give you the right story because you're saying some of the decline in U.S. manufacturing, which is the picture we're looking at, if we include Hamilton, which is in Canada, I assume, right?
yes,
Which if we include Hamilton, then into this, then it wouldn't look like such a precipitous decline. That is, it just moved around to a different part of the Great Lakes area, which probably, I assume, because it happened, it's sort of more efficient to do it there, right? If you mapped it
yeah.
out, right?
Well, it's because at the time Canadian wages were a lot less than U.S. wages,
Oh, I see. Okay.
so
I thought we'd be able to tell just looking at the geography of it why Hamilton was a great place to bring all your
no,
stuff together and make steel. But
it's
you're
just
saying it had more to do with wages.
no, it's just the north side of the lake, so it's not. It's actually a worse place to do it than in Pittsburgh
Oh,
from a
oh, really?
geography point of view.
Okay.
It was just cheaper in the '80s because in the '80s you could pay a Canadian 20 cents for what you paid an American a dollar for
Wow. Why is the north side worse?
because it's farther from the coal.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So it does make much sense. Okay. Thank you. And so sorry about the comms problem here. I will try once again to talk to my internet service provider to figure out why every so often uploading just dies, which YouTube interprets as the stream is done and shuts it down, which is annoying. Um,
Yeah.
and then I've got some stitching together, both of this one and another one we did to, for the record, have them on YouTube all put back together. Okay, I did want to highlight a few things. So let's see. First of all, super chat from Death by Cognitive Dissonance. Showing my support to you and this informative channel. Thanks, Radlib and friends. Thank you, sir. I thought there was at least one comment that I thought you might want to comment on. Let's see. Oh, when will we build the prophesied rail bridge across the Bering Strait to Europe? Fun idea. Might be some political issues with that at the moment, but maybe things will get better. T Swan says, only thing that changed was shipping all this out to China. Now, I don't think that's quite true. I think China just made their own steel. It isn't so much that we're shipping our steel to them, right?
Well, the Chinese situation is quite different. So if you look at the Chinese steel producing region, it's all the steel plants are right along the coast. And the way they work is they take Australian iron and Australian coal on ships from Australia to the coast of China, manufacture it in China, and then put it on big boats and ship it all over the world.
Okay. Oh yeah.
So
Did we look at this together recently? That Australia is this big source of raw materials.
we looked at the Australian export relationship with China.
That's
we
right.
didn't talk about it in the well, we talked about steel manufacturing in that episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how the Chinese steel manufacturing industry works. It's all done right on the coast, with goods from international waters. It's very, very artificial in that sense.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm missing this. What's artificial about it?
Well, so if you compare it to the way that industries are located in Europe or the way that industries are located in the United States, they're located specifically at the site of these resources, right? So if you look at steel manufacturing in Germany, it's right on rivers that pass through both the coal and iron region. Right. That's why it is where it is.
And same as the story we've been telling here. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Whereas none of those resources are present anywhere near the steel mills in China. There's like a 3,000 nautical mile shipping route to Australia that makes it all kind of work.
Kind of. Yeah. Okay. But then, as we know, wages are going up in China. So they're going to become uncompetitive, aren't they? Because of rising wages.
Yeah, I don't know what the future of that industry is. It is extremely heavily subsidized. So, it's extremely heavily subsidized. They're both directly in that the manufacturers are paid to make steel, but also indirectly in that, unlike the U.S., which really shut down naval production, which was the principal draw for the steel industry. There's kind of two draws. There's the auto industry and there's the shipbuilding industry, both of which are basically the shipbuilding industry is basically dormant in the United States at the moment, and the auto industry isn't experiencing growth. In China, however, there's rapid growth in the shipbuilding and auto industry, and the shipbuilding industry is heavily tied up with the defense industry there at the moment as they're trying to catch up to the U.S. in terms of naval power. So those subsidies of that industry may make it viable for a very long time, even though on a straight competitive basis, the location of the mills doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I was going to say, starving Chinese peasants to artificially prop up steel production in China. I've seen this movie before.
Yeah, it's been going on a really long time.
Mao did that.
Yeah, so
I guess I thought of that as just something that happened during the Great Leap Forward, but maybe they just never stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's just more money now, so instead of starving, they just live at a substandard a
Yeah,
substandard standard of living, right?
less than they would. Yeah. Okay. Earnwolf 99 says anthracite is low carbon. I think there's some periods needed in this chat. Bituminous, bituminous. I don't know how to say that. Coal is
Yeah.
normal coal, way more common. Virtually every state has mines for bituminous coal, but anthracite is all Appalachians and Pennsylvania, which is needed for steel. Which I think the map you pulled sort of tells that
Yeah,
story. It's just
there's
that the
actually
medium and high volatile bituminous coal is much more common than
yeah.
the stuff in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, right?
Yeah, and then there's so this shows two grades of coal. People in the
Mm-hmm.
coal industry have like I think there's 12 different names for various kinds of coal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's a much more detailed story here you could tell. Uh, I'm m- you're kind of at the edge of my expertise here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so
Another comment, Gergster says, interesting to see the importance of the Great Lakes. There's long been talk of using Hudson's Bay for shipping, but ice conditions have made it unusable for part of the year. So that unusability for part of the year means it just has never become as key a part of this whole system, I guess, right?
well, the other problem with Hudson's Bay is it doesn't have access to the internet. Like one of the key pieces that we didn't spend that much time on is you can both exit the Great Lakes watershed through New York State and you can
Mm-hmm.
exit it through the Mississippi River watershed, which means that you have ready access to the international market,
Mm-hmm.
and you have ready access to the international market 12 months a year.
Right.
Whereas if you whatever you try to do on Hudson's Bay, you only have 6 or 7 months a year of access to the international markets, and so
Mm-hmm.
that's a problem. And not only that, anywhere where you build a port facility in the Arctic, you get worse ice conditions than before you built the port facility because you stop the wave action. Um, so the current ice conditions would probably be made worse if you attempted to construct deep water ports.
Oh, that's interesting.
So this has been like a serious problem in Arctic industry for a very long time. It's one of the many reasons why uh, people who talk about Canada have been talking about the resources of the high Arctic for like 50 plus years, and they never seem to get developed. And there's it's not random. There are very good reasons for it.
And I'm sorry, Gergster's comment continues and gets brings in another thing you've talked about. Perhaps Hudson's Bay could be opened with nuclear-powered ships with icebreakers. The potential for shipping would be massive, especially if Western Canada ever secedes. That is, if British Columbia hindered shipments.
Yeah, this has actually been a big talking point in the Canadian oil and gas industry for quite a while.
Oh.
So because the Biden administration killed the Keystone pipeline,
Mm-hmm.
there's a huge discount for Western Canadian oil, because it can't get to the international markets. So there have been efforts to there's been an effort to build a pipeline west through British Columbia, and that effort has been thwarted um, by the federal government. Uh, there has been an effort to build a pipeline east, but that effort has been thwarted by the EPA because it would have gone through uh, Minnesota and maybe Wisconsin as well, south of Superior instead of north of Superior. And so there's been talk of building a pipeline to Churchill Falls, which is a big port on Hudson's Bay, and shipping oil to the international market from there. Um, I don't think that that is going to happen in the short term, but I think it is essential to have this narrative in the public conscience as part of the bargaining between Western Canada and Eastern Canada.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah, which we've talked a little bit about some of the regional power um, power centers, I guess, the contending powers in Canadian politics, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we caught up on the comments, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah. There's lots of coal in Alberta. Uh,
There's lots of coal everywhere, but
yeah. Yeah. Right.
specific kinds matter, and
Yeah.
what really matters is being able to deliver it economically somewhere where it needs to be used.
Right. So this is a bit different. Well, I don't know. You tell. Sorry. Last thing, and then we'll stop. Oil. Uh, how big of an issue is it for oil to be inconveniently located? You know, you make your big oil strike, but it's in the middle of, it's not anywhere near water or anything like that. Are you going to be
Well,
rich, or is it not going to matter? And people come and say, "That's nice, you have oil, but we can't get it to where we need to get it to."
well, right now there's about a $30 discount for Alberta oil versus international oil.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like maybe 50% off for the inability for having to take it by rail. So these are quite um, these are quite substantial factors in a high volume industry like that.
Right. Um, okay. We'll stop then finally with Charlemagne's comment. Thanks, gentlemen, for this explanation of Jay Burden's Twitter account. And that's an inside joke. If you don't get it, don't worry about it. Okay. Thanks very much, Black Horse. Sorry, everyone, and especially Black Horse for the technical problems. I will stitch together the two pieces and we'll get the full thing up on YouTube, because um, Black Horse has mentioned this to me some time ago, that this whole area has quite an interesting history, and it's really, I guess, once you understand this, it actually helps you understand the history of the war between the states, the history of World War One, the history of World War Two. Right? It sort of feeds into a lot of stuff that a lot of people in our circles are very interested in, those three conflicts and sort of how it went down the way it did. This actually is a key piece that I had never heard anyone talk about personally. Uh,
Yeah, industrial history is not very popular in the West at the moment,
right.
but I think it's very important in understanding, particularly 20th century history.
Right.
I've always taken an interest in it.
Yeah. Well, the Ruhr Valley, Valley, the Ruhr Valley,
Yeah.
Ruhr. I remember that coming up in World War One, World War Two stuff, but it went over my head. I didn't understand, why are they talking about the Ruhr Valley? What's the importance? You're helping me get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and all the sort of competing coal mining strikes in during the interwar period in Germany were all about this as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much, Black Horse. I have not gotten my act together for the non-Black Horse weeks yet, but I will be working with my video editor. I just need to do some audio recording, then he's going to do some edited videos. My plan is to have edited videos coming out in the off weeks. And I already know what I already have. I basically want to turn some of my articles into edited videos. So it's literally just a matter of me sitting down at a mic in front of a mic and doing it. So coming soon. And thanks, everybody. Otherwise, let's see, 2 weeks from today, 19th, getting kind of close to Christmas, but still a possibility, Black Horse?
yeah, we'll
Okay,
see if we can do it.
let's shoot for it. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, especially those that followed us from the broken stream to the part two, which a lot of people did. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Okay, talk to you later.